why the common law, why there is a need for a common law court, why the system is failing, and how to go about convening courts.
The fact that the richest 1% have so much more than everybody else. But most of the focus seems to be on the United States. And it strikes me that the same story needs to be told about global inequality too. So I did some research, and this is what I found from reliable sources like the UN. It turns out that while the US is totally out of whack, things are actually way worse for the planet as a whole. Let's start with this graph. A perfectly even distribution of wealth among all living people, with everyone divided into 5 equal groups. Now, let's show how much each group actually has. Shocking, right? 80% of the world's people barely have any wealth. It's hard to even see them on the chart. Meanwhile, the richest 2%, they have more wealth than half of the rest of the world. Let's look at this chart another way. Let's take the whole world's population, all 7 billion of us, and reduce it to just a representative 100 individuals. Here they are, poorest people on the left, richest people on the right. Now let's show how the world's total wealth, roughly $223 trillion, is distributed. The vast majority have practically nothing. Nothing with which to educate their children, nothing with which to pay for basic medicines. While the richest 1%, they've accumulated 43% of our world's wealth. The bottom 80%, meanwhile, that's 8 out of every 10 people, have just 6% between them. But even this doesn't really show how extreme things have become. The richest 300 people on Earth have the same wealth as the poorest 3 billion. So the number of people it takes to fill a mid-sized commercial aircraft have more wealth than the populations of India, China, the US, and Brazil combined. We can also see this difference geographically, with a huge and growing gap between a few rich places versus the majority of the world. For most of history, things were much more equal. 200 years ago, rich countries were only 3 times richer than poor countries. By the end of colonialism in the 1960s, they were 35 times richer. Today, they're about 80 times richer. Rich countries try to compensate for this by giving aid to poor countries, about $130 billion each year. That's a lot of money. So then why does the wealth gap keep getting bigger? One reason I found is that large corporations are taking more than $900 billion out of poor countries each year through a form of tax avoidance called trade mispricing. On top of this, each year poor countries are paying about $600 billion in debt service to rich countries on loans that have already been paid off many times over. And then there's the money that poor countries lose from trade rules imposed by rich countries to get access to more resources and cheaper labor. Economists from the University of Massachusetts calculate that this costs poor countries about $500 billion a year. Altogether, that's more than $2 trillion that flows from some of the poorest parts of the world to the richest. Every year. Rich governments like to say they're helping poor countries develop. But who's developing who here? This makes me think that there's something wrong with the basic rules of the global economy. It can't be okay that the wealth of our planet is becoming so concentrated in the hands of such a tiny number of people. The only reasonable response, it seems to me, and our only hope, is to change the rules.
Interesting. You're asking yourself just now, well, why are we looking at this? It all boils down to money. That's all it's about. We've listened to speakers over the last few days go on about the one world order, what's happening just now, and the fact that people don't understand what's going on. When we actually look at the judicial system, this plays a large part in it. It's the control that they have, the control mechanism. So again, what we were doing, we're looking first of all at the monetary side. This was taken, it was actually passed on by a friend, and we thought, right, we're going to use this just to show you. Just to let everyone know, the graph that came up, I'm way, way, way over that side. In fact, I'm not even sure if I'm on the chart, but in relation to the richest people over this side, if there's anyone here that's in this 1%, I'd like to meet you in the bar afterwards. But this is where it starts now. We're going about the corruption here and what's happening with the governments. He says, they're not looking after people. The system is designed to protect vested interests. It's certainly not about justice. And unfortunately, I came across the judicial system a number of years ago. I took on the state as a whistleblower and ended up suffering. Now, what I'll do is I'm going to point out one or two things. I pointed out earlier on just now, this is the first conference I've actually done. The common law court, I'm here to speak about the common law court just to explain how it operates. I'm not the common law court. You are the common law court, men and women, living men and women. If I just, a show of hands just now, just quickly, does anyone know what illegal fiction is? Yes, yes. Surprising, yeah, okay, a few hands there, maybe about 25%. What we're going to do is we're going to explain some of the myths behind the system just now, the judicial system, and we'll give you a few pointers just to tell you what is happening within this justice system, or lack of it. I came from, believe it or not, a casino background years ago, was a general manager, was very successful. I came across a couple of dodgy directors, and to protect my license, I left. As a general manager, the gaming board were aware of it. The government wanted to know what was going on, and they found out that they had been negligent, and they allowed these guys to commit various crimes. Now, why the gaming board covered this up is because it would have had a huge effect on their gaming revenue, taxes. So they wanted to cover that up, so they cast me out. I ended up losing everything. The directors went for me, ended up bankrupt and everything, and it's only then when I looked at the judicial system, I thought, no, this is wrong. It's disgusting what they're doing. When I left the job, here, I need a remedy, I need a lawful remedy, I'll hire a solicitor, go to a court. How naive could you be? I then started to learn. But when we're actually looking at the system just now, many people don't understand what's going on. So this is what we're going to try to explain today. As I said just now, the common law court is something that's been set up. What we will explain to you just now, within the existing system, if you look at the court system in any country, the judicial system. In the UK, you can go back hundreds of years, right? We have one system in this country for justice. Many other countries have a similar system, right? It's controlled by the state, the government, or even the Crown at one point. This is what's happened in the UK. Now, recently, because of the work that many people have been doing in relation to the common law court, we've actually had judges in the courts in this country have admitted that we currently have two judicial systems operating. The statutory system, which is controlled by the government, and we have the common law court system, which is run by the people, which is yourselves. So what I'm going to do is we're going to explain roughly how this works, how it's set up, and introduce you to sort of common law. Now, I'm calling it common law. It's not common law is used because of the English-speaking population worldwide. They seem to relate justice with common law principles, inherited birthrights. This is what people accept. So it's terminology, it's quite good. I apologise just now because I'm not very PC. I don't give a stuff as about the state. What I'm going to do is I'll just speak as I see fit, and that's it. So hopefully, whether I get an invitation back next year is a different thing. But what we're going to do just now is point out some of the flaws, what's happening within the system, just to let you know. Now, the one thing we're going to say is, look, common law could also be called natural law. It's also the law of the land, right? In relation to, obviously, it says the logo that you have at the bottom of the logo, it says vis legis. Common law court, vis legis. They use Latin terms, why not use one as well? Vis legis means law of the land. Right? It takes away from their maritime law and it puts the control back to the people, the authority. Right? Now, when we do this, when we set it up, we're going to highlight the difference now between living men and fictions. You may or may not know about this, and again, I'm aware that it's going out live as well. But what you've got to remember, although it's called common law, it is applicable to everyone. Believe it or not, being from Scotland, slightly different in Scotland because we had something called the Declaration of Arbroath. They determine that if you're born in Scotland, you're born sovereign. Yeah, It's fine. Hold on. No. Wherever you're born, you're sovereign. Doesn't matter where you're born. Race, creed, colour, religion, anything. Doesn't matter. It's only after you're born, someone then grabs you and takes you into the system. When you're in the system, that's it, right? This is in Scotland, they tend to argue and say, no, we're still sovereign, that's fine, but they argue the point, but the state grab you. So what we're going to do is explain the difference. Realistically, at this moment in time, I would say there's a large majority of people here don't exist under common law. Now you say, well, how can I not exist? I'm here, I'm sitting here. I can see people sitting here. It's not a problem. If you take an individual here, plump anyone, just choose someone, take the name of that individual, you go up the road 5 miles and say, look, have you heard of this person, this individual? No. Is there any record of them under common law? No. Can you identify this name, this individual? Yes. How? The statutory system. Council tax, this is voters' roll, anything, bank cards, national insurance numbers, everything. You're in the statutory system. That's it. This is created at birth. Now, how it works is your parents, this is the clever bit, your parents at birth were told to register your birth, right? That's the way it works. They don't have to, but they were told they had to. So they register your birth. Now, what they do, the government, the state, create a legal fiction. The legal fiction that they create is the name that's on your bank card, it's on your driving license, it's on your passport, it's on anything that you deal with the government. They don't deal with you as an individual, a living man or a woman. They only deal with the fiction, the legal title. That's it. Now what they do is a long story. We don't have enough time to go through all this, but you can check it out. They make money with the fiction, by using the fiction. Now, if you think about it, the first one, the first video we showed, it says it questioned the rules, changed the rules. Well, literally, this is what it is. If you think about what's available just now and think about the people that are suffering, you think about things yourself and say, no, if it's acceptable, fine, stay with the system. If it's not acceptable, you change it. Now, when you change it just now, if you think about it, first of all, if you turn around and say, right, I want to do something about this, want to defend myself, how do we do that? What I'm going to do just now is click onto this one. The next slide here, it gives you 3 major declarations. The declarations, the first one over the far right is 1215. Many may know that that was the Magna Carta. Now, the Magna Carta was one of the founding documents that they used worldwide to set up the system with its judicial system, to set up the way they operate, the way they conduct themselves, the state with the men and women. So that's fine. A lot of countries throughout the world have used this as a founding document and still use it to this day. It can never ever be altered. Never. From 1215 it stands. What happened after that? There was 1 or 2 amendments, and the government was then created in this country. When they created the government started to change it, but they didn't change the first one. They can't. They changed the additional ones, and they say to you that the Magna Carta is not applicable. It's crap. It's still applicable this day. You have rights, but the government have hidden this from you. The next one, 1320, for those Scots in the audience, I don't know if there's any. 1320, the Declaration of Arbroath. Literally speaking, in simple terms, if you've seen the film Braveheart, King Edward Longshanks was fighting with the Scots, came up to Scotland, there was battles for a number of years, and Robert the Bruce, when the English won the last battle, they says, look, we need to protect ourselves. So at the time, the authority on earth was the Pope. So Robert the Bruce and various noblemen in Scotland prepared the Declaration of Arbroath. Literally speaking, what it says is, look, in Scotland, when we are born, we're born sovereign. That's it. We will never ever come under the rule of the English. Because of the English, obviously because of Edward Longshanks. And they turn around and says, as long as 100 of us remain alive to this day, we will never be brought under English rule. Right? Now that's significant, because from that, he says, it's actually been accepted. Now what you've got to think about, if you go back to the church at the time of the Pope, they've accepted this document. What they actually do is within this clause, they've come up and says, look, if 100 people stand together, you can bring down governments, you can take on countries. All you need is 100 people. Now the church accepted that. The UK government have accepted that. Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland still goes on about this. He says, she turns around and says, look, we're sovereign in Scotland, you will not pass this in the English Parliament, you cannot do this, we're sovereign. So the English and they turn around and say, right, okay, fine, you're sovereign. We go back up to Scotland, you go to the Scottish Parliament and Nicola Sturgeon says, right, okay, this is what we're doing. Yeah, but we're sovereign. But it doesn't matter. He says, we're government. But it's different in England. They use it to suit themselves. But as I said just now, the 100 figure is significant. After that, he says, we've got 1776 was the Declaration of Independence, America, which is fine. Now again, as everyone knows, they still use this just now. It's a founding document there. That was based a lot on the Declaration of Arbroath. He said, but it also took in aspects of the Magna Carta. So all these documents are great. Unfortunately, they have one thing in common, which I'm not overly fussed with, is that when they were created with, not in all cases, but also they were created with the Crown or with the establishment, governments, right? Which is fine. It did affect the people did benefit, but the government are still in there. So they were actually writing the laws and the documents. But they were good documents, they're all applicable, and we still use them today, great. But we'll go on a little bit further later on. When we do that, we'll go back slightly just now. I'm going to play a video just now to explain the significance of the Magna Carta just now. So I'm going to put on a judge just now. If you just listen carefully to what he has to say, okay?
One clause that people always forget is Clause 61, and it's from this that we take the very vivid principle that nobody is above the law. No king anointed, God's servant, inherits by divine luck, you could call it, but right. Now, every king in medieval Europe made an oath that he'd be a good king, do lots of justice, look after lots of poor people, all the sort of things that you'd want your new king to do. But in medieval Europe, if the king didn't provide justice and so on and so forth, I'm afraid they took the view that he had to answer to God in heaven. Well, when the king's dead, it's not much good if you've had no justice or you've not been properly looked after. And what Magna Carta did was to say in Clause 61, if the king does not abide by the charter when he's notified that he's in breach of it, in effect, a council of 25 barons can take over the running of the kingdom. They're not to harm him, they're not to injure him, they're not, of course, to treat him with violence or his family, but they're no longer stuck with their oaths of allegiance and fealty. This, I think, is a fantastically important moment. Suddenly, the king is answerable on earth, not just in heaven.
Interesting. Magna Carta is still applicable. You have here a High Court judge explaining the use of Article 61. Article 61 was actually invoked in 2001. Technically, 25 barons had turned around and says, look, this is ridiculous. In relation to what the government are doing, what the Queen's doing, they're committing treason against the people. And they says, this is unacceptable. So these barons invoked Article 61. Now, having done that, as many people stood behind them, and again, they've submitted oaths to the barons to say they stand with them. That's fine. But what we've actually found out is that the government, and especially the judicial system, don't give a stuff. They're not interested. Simply because if you put in an oath and say you stand under Article 61, couldn't care less. Because they say that Article 61 in Magna Carta has been altered because they've introduced statutory legislation. No, they haven't. But of course, these idiots that sit in these courts and make the decisions, they are not held accountable and they're getting away with literally murder. But this is what's happening. But again, Article 61 is relevant. Magna Carta is relevant. Declaration of Arbroath and the Declaration of Independence. These are significant documents, but because it doesn't fit with their requirements, They ignore them. This is where the common law court comes into its own. We speak about the difference between, we go back to the fiction now, we speak to the difference between men and women, and obviously it says they're living in the fiction. Now, when your birth certificate was created, your parents were told to register your birth. The state create the fiction and they continue using that. The difference here is, according to their laws, I would say laws, they're not laws, they're rules, because they're corporations. All these people, this is whether it's courts, whether it's the Queen, anyone. Now again, this is, I'm not religious, I'm not a royalist, it says it doesn't really bother me one way or the other. People are entitled to choose whatever they want. Religion, faith, race, colour, it says sovereignty, it says royalty, it doesn't make any difference. That's fine. So we're not here, we're dealing with common law, we're dealing with men and women, right? Everyone has a right to choose, but the state are using rules against the people. So with the creation of the birth certificate, what they're doing is saying, right, I've got you. So basically, when you go, hypothetically, you go into their courts to defend yourself, you're charged for some reason, you go in, it says you work in there, they've attached the fiction. Now, to compensate that, the people that have been involved with this has been going now, technically, the first common law court was convened on the 11th of June, and it was 2 years ago. So next month, we'll have had 2 years. During that time, we've held, I think, 11 different court hearings. We've dealt with about 28 different cases, and we've dealt with over 200 people during that. So we are convening courts, it is making a difference, and there's a lot going on. But many people don't understand what is happening. However, if we go back slightly, when you look at their system, if you go in to defend yourself, I've been in court myself. So when you go in, you stand there and say, look, I have inherent birthrights. I'm a sovereign. So you stand there, don't like lawyers. At the end of the day, what had happened is I run out of funds anyway. I'd lost everything, so I defended myself. But I thought, I'm not using your system. So I pointed to the judge in Scotland, they're called sheriffs. I said, look, I stand as a living man under common law. And he says, right, okay, fine. And I says, you will not do this, you can't do this. He says, I'm not really interested. I says, no, I'm standing, I have inherent rights. No, I'm not speaking to you. Now, what they tend to do is say, look, I can't hear you. It's not because they're deaf. Well, maybe. It says, but it's because they're not allowed to deal with you. As a living man in flesh and blood, they have no authority over you. They can't deal with you. They can only deal with a fiction, the legal title. So the legal title they deal with is the fiction that was created by the government. This is where it becomes interesting. So we've got two things here. First of all, if you go into their court, they will not accept you as a man. So how do you obtain justice? You can't. So that's strike one. I thought there's something wrong there. The next thing is the fiction. How do you compensate that? I thought, no, it doesn't work. So what we do is we turn around and say, right, they use the birth certificate, they're using that there. Now, I have individuals who we've spoken recently, says we'll go into a little bit more in another 10 minutes or so, we'll go into a case. But what we do is through the use of the fiction, and obviously this is the birth for the living man or woman, we can actually confirm our standing in the courts. They have no way that they can attack individuals if you take away their control, their authority, their jurisdiction, and their consent. This can be done here. So with the common law court, when we've actually done this, we decided what we're going to do is set up the first in the world of its kind, is effectively a database for living men and women. Right? Now, in relation to obviously countries and worldwide, we actually have 57 countries with people who have registered, recorded their information. So they've submitted declarations in 57 countries. Now, the terminology we'll use, which is another thing we'll discuss, when you stand as a living man or a woman, in their legal system, they use what they call legalese. It's exactly the same words, but with a different meaning. Now, if you think, no, that doesn't sound right, so well, hold on. What they do is you have a standard word, right? So basically, it's a standard word like understand. When the police speak to you, they ask you, they'll read you a charge, or they'll explain why they're stopping you or why they want to speak to you. The first thing you say is, do you understand? Right? Now, understand, effectively, do you comply? Are you aware of what I'm saying? You understand that? Simple English. right? Understand in legalese means, do you stand under my authority? So of course, you not knowing would say yes, but you've given away consent, so you're now under their authority. They can then prosecute you, charge you, do whatever they want. Now, there was an interesting thing which I'll mention today about money. The police here, there's a difference between police officers and police constables, right? Police constables are basically there to uphold the law of the land, right? Cause no harm, loss or injury, that's it. Breach of the peace, deal with that, murder, serious crimes. Anything else which relates to acts of parliament is statutory legislation. That only is applicable to the fiction. The fiction is created by the government, but what they do is they tag on to you. Now, what we're going to do is, we'll show the next slide here. This one in relation to documents, this 3rd of January this year, it's a new document that was created to go along with the previous three. This document's a one-page document up at the top, but it is the declaration for the Common Law Court. So basically it says that we are living men and women, we stand together, we will not accept statutory rule. We will not be bound by it, and also if someone tries to enforce it, they will be committing a crime against living men and women, and they'll be held accountable for it. There is the phrase which we've taken from the Declaration of Arbroath, which basically says, look, as long as 100 of us stand together, we will not be held under statutory rule. So therefore, they cannot apply statutory legislation to you if you come out with. Now, we'll go back to the police. It's the same with the governments as well. They use it, I think, when they're swearing in the President in America. Theresa May does the same here. They always speak about having the consent of the people. We police by consent. So basically it says, we police by consent, that's fine, but if the police come up to see you and you don't want to speak to them, you don't consent, they have no authority. So that's the way it works. Now, the declaration is the first time we actually have this document here. It says, so we've put this information into the system just to explain that we have living men and women. And because the figure of 100 was significant, we've taken 100 signatures, a sample of the men and women. This is who stand with the Common Law Court. Now, I was at a court hearing recently because they tried to close down the Common Law Court. Long story, I'm not allowed to say too much, but I was in court. But part of the hearing, very cleverly, I turned around and I wanted to interview a witness, and the Procurator Fiscal, who is the equivalent of the CPS, says, no, you can't ask him to read that, because I had this document. It's the first page, which is the declaration. So I says, can you read this? They said, no, he's not allowed to read that. I says, why not? They said, well, you can ask him questions, you can't ask him to read. I thought, sorry. So we took the document back from him. I then took it back and said, right, okay, right, I'd like you to pay attention, please. I'm now going to read something to you, and I'm going to ask you a question. So I actually read out the declaration for the Common Law Court in their statutory court, and I made sure that it was recorded on audio as well. So they have that in there. A copy of this document went into the court as well, which challenged their authority and jurisdiction. So we're starting now to build up the picture and paint the scene. You can actually take them on in their own system. Now, when we do that, it says we've set this, we've established the position. When we've done that, it says, I'll just click on the next one, sorry. Yeah, right. The difference here when we're using the two courts, it says having established the system, it's simple. You would think it's the same, but it's not. We have a distinction now between a living man or woman and a legal fiction, right? So what we're going to do is look at the two words here, right? You have a legal system and a lawful system. The legal system is for the statutory system, the fiction, the legal entity. Lawful is for the living men and women, the flesh and blood, right? So when we look at the legal system is based on acts of parliament, mostly made by corrupt politicians. Obviously, this is being bribed by lobbyists. They set up within the system statutory obligations. Now, they're not laws, they're not rules, they're not acts of parliament. They're actually just obligations. That's all it is. But they're saying that you have to comply. The next one, you are forced compliance is actually unlawful. They can't do that. Now, anything under common law and natural law, they cannot force you to do something. They just can't do it. No one else has a right to force anyone else to do anything. But this is what the government are doing. They're not giving you a choice. They don't tell you. They force you to accept the law. And they say, that's it. Now, this is actually without consent. They're not allowed to enforce it. It is unlawful. It deals with fiction. Now, the fiction could be corporations, legal entities, statutes, codes, and policies. Right? We've covered things like legal entities. Legal entity is a legal fiction, but it's also a corporation. So the fact that they give you a name, my legal corporation is Mr. John Smith. I can say that because I own it. It's clever, but we'll explain how we do that in a minute. I own my legal fiction, but the legal fiction is based on the statutory birth certificate, which the government control. So this is how we do it. The language they use is legalese. It sounds like English, but it has different meanings. I showed you that with the word understand. It's completely different. Now, if you go into court for the first time and you have to defend yourself, the courts in this country, in fact, throughout the world, they're not there for justice. Be in no doubts whatsoever, it's got nothing to do with justice. Every so often, you get a result, it says someone will get that, but overall, if you look at the system as a complete package, you will not get justice. The court system are corporations. They're run for profit. The police are corporations run for profit. The government, the Queen, everyone, they're all corporations. You say, nah, it can't be. Of course it is. You can check this out. There's a company in America, it's done in Bradstreet. They basically do a credit check on all the companies worldwide. If you go to Dun & Bradstreet, type in the relevant information, they're all companies, corporations. This is the way they work. It says you don't get, the MPs are even corporations. This is how they deceive people. You're not dealing with men and women here. This is their system. Now, to break their legislation, it's an infraction of a policy. That's all it is. It's not a law. It cannot be a law. It's a rule. It's like Tesco's supermarket. If you break one of the rules, well, so what? Who gives a stuff? It's exactly the same as them. Tesco sent you a letter saying, right, I'm sorry, he says, there's a parking offence, you're speeding, or there's a parking offence on this day in our car park. We're not happy. We're summoning you to appear to court. You have to come to their premises and they're going to fine you. If you get a summons like that, what are you going to say to them? Sod off. But it's the same with the courts. It's exactly the same. It says it's a place of business. It's a registered company. They trade for profit. It's not for justice. You do not get justice in the courts here. Right? It's not set up for that. This treats you as a corporate person. Person is a legal fiction. Right? Many people think, well, are you a person? Yes, I'm a person. No, a person is a legal entity. A person is the name on your driving license. It's a name on your passport. It's a name on your bank card. That is it, the legal fiction. That is the person. When the rules are not adhered to, essentially, all it is a breach of contract. It's a contract. That's what they do. They say, but they're saying it's laws, which is not the case. It has no force in law without your consent, but they trick you into giving consent. When the police say to you, do you understand what I'm saying? You say, yes. You're standing under their authority. But they're actually using legalese, the same words with different definitions. There was a guy I learned a lot from, a guy who's no longer with us, and he was mentioned earlier, and I'll mention him again, John Harris. He says he's no longer with us, but the guy was brilliant with what he was saying. I learned a lot from him. But the point is, they use this system, and one of the things he did say, which stuck with me, is you have the English Oxford Dictionary. All the English words are in there. They add a few, but the dictionary is there, so that's fine. Why would you need a legal dictionary if you've already got the Oxford one, English dictionary? Why do you have the legal one? Not only that, why does it change every couple of years? It's the same words, but they keep changing the meanings. You don't know about it, but this is what they do. This seeks to profit and control. Now, if we look at the other side, the lawful, this is for the living man and woman, the flesh and blood one. First of all, you deal with common law. Common law, it's also called natural law and also law of the land. It's a law of tradition, which has been established by precedent as fact over the years. The law that is common to all. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are the king, the queen, or a lowly peasant. It doesn't matter. It's applicable to everyone, which is crucial. It can only be determined by due process of law, which is a trial by a jury. It deals with facts, which is basically living beings, and truth. We don't deal with fictions. It's with living men and women. The language we use is English, just plain English, no hidden meanings. Again, there can be no crime without an injured party. So when they prosecute you for various statutory offences, they're doing that to make money. You haven't harmed anyone, but they charge you. Now, interesting thing, which changed it all. I was actually watching the television. I switched on in the morning just to try and catch bits and pieces. There was a news feature on. There was two things. First of all, someone got charged for walking down the street in London. He was attacked by the police, jumped on and said, right, here, we're issuing a ticket. They fined him £90. I thought, all right, okay, fine. His crime was hiding his face. He was working, they're saying now, what they're doing is within the system now, they've set up CCTV and it's face recognition. So what they're doing now is when you walk down the street, they want to see who's walking where. They've got you there. Now, the face recognition was set up. This guy had seen the camera, had a jacket on, so he pulled up like his scarf up to his nose. So when that happened, the police normalled him, jumped him, and he says, right, okay. So he said, look, what are you doing? He says, you're not filming me. He said, no, you can't do that. You're covering up your face. He said, no, you're not filming me. He said, no, that's an offence. Here, we're fining you. They gave him a £90 ticket. £90 ticket for covering up your face. This is disgusting. They're passing legislation, which they say are laws, they're not, they're rules, and you're forced to comply. That's crap. They can't do that. It says, so if you think... It actually gets better than that, but we'll move on. It says, in this system here, it says, they treat you as a man or a woman, which is fine, you're not a fiction. And again, common law, it's lawful. If there's harm caused to another, the law's broken, right? Now, the principles of law, which is common law, natural law, God's law, if you want, anything, right? It's the law of the land. It's basically cause no harm, cause no loss, and cause no injury. In your contractual dealings, ensure you're honourable. That's it. There's nothing else. That is natural law. Now, it doesn't matter, we're not religious or anything, but I'm going to go on a bit about it. And also, it says, when you look at the various aspects, it says, look, it tends down, it says, whether you're a believer, there is a creator. If you believe that, you could be, it doesn't matter which religion you obviously believe in, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. But basically, it says the laws that come down through the years, through the centuries, and obviously through, believably, the creator, they follow natural law principles, which is fine. That is law. Everything else other than that is man-made, it's government, it's statutory. It's not law, it's rules and regulations. You do not have to comply, right? In common law, if you're looking at lawful issues in relation to men and women, it is lawful. It has the full force of law if you cause harm, loss, or injury to someone. And also, it says common law actually looks to seek justice for the individuals concerned. They don't look to line the state's pockets and obviously reward people for fat cat pensions and things like that. Now, what we've done, to go back to this certificate thing, this here is a common law birth certificate. Now, this was actually quite good. It was a female in England, I'm not going to name her, but the state used statutory rules to do various things, one of which, sorry? Oh, we're there.
Just wait a second. Sorry.
It's okay. What the state do in relation to various things, one of the issues they deal with is children. So I'll go on a little bit about more about this later on. In relation to children, what the statutory system do are trying to remove them. So what we've said is, look, if we're going to defend ourselves, we should have a birth certificate. Now, what we do is we allow people, the common law court is not a company, it's not a business, it's not one individual. The common law court is the people, it's you. So it says it's not a corporation. We've actually been spoken to by one or two people and says, look, we can actually set this up and effectively have a corporation and we can charge and we can do this and that. No, it's not about that. This is about justice, nothing else. No money involved, it's justice. That's it. Now, basically what we do is we spoke to people about obviously setting something up like this, and they says, look, we need something under common law. So what we have is we have a birth certificate we set up. So we have a website. Now, the website is there basically to record information. That's it. So when you convene a common law court, I happen to convene the first common law court. I'd done so because I was looking to obtain a lawful remedy, which was deprived within the statutory system. Now, you turn around and say, well, how can you do that? Well, of course you can. If there's something, if you require a lawful remedy, you use what's available, the statutory system. If you cannot obtain it, you have a choice to do it yourself. Now, you can go back thousands of years, back to the Greeks, and then obviously come through to present time. You have a right to convene a court. Hundreds of years ago in this country, you used to set up small courts in villages. It says your local community would convene a court. If your neighbour had pinched some cattle from you or a horse or something, if there was a problem, you would go to the community and say, look, I need a court because this guy has stolen from me, I want him prosecuted. So you would convene a court, set it up from the community, no officials, the community would get together, have a jury there, and they would hear both parties. They would then issue a verdict. That's the way it worked. It's just simple. That's all it is. No involvement with the state, not about money, it's about justice. Now, in doing this, they're targeting people through the birth certificate. So under common law, we need to confirm that people exist. So we say, right, what we'll do is we'll allow people to record information on the site that they were born. So you can actually go onto the site and say, look, here, go under the birth certificate section and say, look, I was born. I was born on this date, this is my name, this is my parents. Now this information, it says nothing happens with it. It's a declaration. I'm saying record information. Forget the English, forget the legalese terminology. I don't give two stuffs about registration and things like that. Look, you're not giving anything away. It's common law. You're making a declaration. You exist. That's it. So if you confirm that you exist, you're making a declaration under common law. So if for some reason you have to defend yourself in the statutory system, you can now confirm that you're a living man or woman, which is fine. Now the birth certificate, when we do that, it says there is a reference number issued. This is for the entry. And when we get that, one of the mothers would come back and says, well, look, why would I like a certificate? It was for a child, to protect the child from the state. We didn't do that. We spoke to various people and said, look, will we do it? Yes, so would we do that? So anything you register on court or declare on court, submit, you can actually obtain a certificate for it. So you get that through the court. And again, it's done at cost price. But the interesting thing about this is you look at the bottom of the document, say it's a 3-page document. Well, the cover page there, obviously, says you have the cover page, and then on that you've got the birth details. So it gives you the birth of the child, birth name of the child, date of birth, place of birth, time of birth, and so on. But you'll see that at the bottom that it's actually stamped and embossed by the court seal. This gives it the authority of the people. This has been issued through the people, it's recorded, and it's obviously confirming your stance as a living man or woman. Now, by doing this, it allows you then to protect yourself in their courts. Now, when we do that, we've set up various documents, and again, we'll explain a little bit about the fiction later on, which I have covered a couple of times in our court. So go back to the use of the fiction now. The fiction that they have, it was created, but because they've created it, if we use their rules, what they've done is committed fraud, right? Now, you were involved, your parents were involved, and also the state were involved. So therefore, according to their rules, they say law rules, contract law rules, according to their rules, it's a contract because it involves more than one individual, right? So this is established. The next thing is, according to their rules, for a contract to be valid, there has to be full disclosure. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I've never been told that they created a fiction for me. I certainly haven't been told what they're doing with it. I presume that you're the same. I presume your parents weren't told either. So therefore, there's no full disclosure. So again, according to their rules, or they say law, the contract's void. If the contract's void, they don't own the fiction. They're using it, but they've created it fraudulently. And because they've created it fraudulently, they cannot do that, they're committing an offence. So, once you establish your position as a living man or woman, and all these things, these entries you do on the site, there's no cost for this. So you make a declaration to confirm you exist. After doing that, and only once you've confirmed your standing as a living man or woman, you can then apply for ownership of the fiction. Why can you do that? Simple. You can do that because they've created it fraudulently, which voids the contract. And if it voids the contract, what it then does is it leaves a fiction lying about. It's on your passport, the driving license. So therefore, who should the rightful owner be? The individual that's attached to. So therefore, you can apply for it. You haven't got it, so you can apply on the site, make an application for ownership of your legal fiction, providing you fill out the details and you've confirmed your birth under common law, you can obtain ownership of the fiction. Now, having done that, in court, I confirmed to a judge as a fact in law that I owned my legal fiction. I also told him that I was a living man and that he had no authority or jurisdiction over me. But bearing in mind these documents went in, they've now been challenged, rebutted, I did say to the sheriff and the CPS at the time, look, I own the legal fiction. It's a fact in law. However, you may not have seen the documents. So as a goodwill gesture, I'm quite happy to help out. Should you wish to challenge this, I'm quite happy for you to do so. Do you wish to challenge it? Because if you do, the first thing you have to do is explain to me how it was created. The two that lowered their heads to speak to me. So I confirm that I'm the owner of my legal fiction in their courts, and the documentation is in the court records as a production. They cannot do anything about it. So you take control away from them. Right, I'll move on to the next one, sorry. I'm going to move on somewhere. We're speaking about the authority of the courts and that. I says, we'll move on slightly because I'm going to change this. Now again, when you ask about things, if you ask for my opinion just now, I'm quite happy with religion, with politics. I think the system that we have in this country and throughout the world, I think is great. I think the system we have, the structure we have is great, brilliant, I love it. It's been developed for centuries, right? We have one problem. The pricks that run the system are all corrupt, right? Now, I was going to say, excuse my language. These guys that run the system, it says they're so corrupt, it's unbelievable. I don't really mind that. It says they're corrupt. But it's when they're attacking people and harming people, that is disgusting. In relation to property theft, if you think about what we're doing with the living man and the fiction, by obviously recording a fiction, what the state are doing just now is removing children as well, right? Property. As a living man or woman, when you have a child, this is you view it as property. That's a terminology. Use it as property. I says, so therefore, the state are coming in and removing property from you. They have no authority to do so. They come in, try and obtain warrants to attach to a child and remove them. Think about it. If they obtain a warrant, the warrant is for a fiction, right? Now, the fiction is attached to the child, but under common law, because it's child's under 16, we've accepted there, the parent can claim the fiction. So if you record your position as a living man or woman, you then obtain your own fiction, record your child's birth under common law, what you can then do is claim the fiction of your child. So effectively, till they become an adult, you can claim the fiction. Now, if you have the fiction, how can they remove a child? Because the fiction is not attached to the child. But they do. But in doing so, they're kidnapping children. So we pointed out to the judges they didn't like it. I said, so these are some of the things we're actually dealing with just now. But if you stand under common law, you can do that. It's the same with land registry. We've got a situation here just now, because of the one world order, or whatever you want to call it, governments are actually, it says, taking back property. They're actually asset stripping people, they're taking them back. The repossessed properties throughout the world just now is disgusting, this is with what they're doing, but it says the system allows to do it. It says you can deal with this under common law by confirming your position. Now again, we'll flick through things, the police as well. The police as well just now, they're not all bad. Well, no, they're not. To be quite honest, the police are actually trained, when they come into the job, they're trained in a statutory system, right? They abide by statutory rules, they're told what to do. They do not know a lot of these things. They just do what they're told to do. You see, they have jobs like everyone else. However, you do get some coppers, like everyone else, who are corrupt, who obviously like the authority, make the like people suffer. This idiot today that charged the guy £90, it says, for obviously not hiding his, or covering up his face. I said, you can't do that. I said, but some people actually take joy in doing that. Now, it says, people don't actually know. It says, when they're in the job, it says, they're trained. I've put in here like the three monkeys: speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. It's fine. They're not aware of what's going on. Now, with the common law and what we're actually passing on, people will start to understand what's going on here from the system. Now, this one, which is relevant for tomorrow, is the issue of 5G, which is global. Now, in the last four of the things on what I'm going to do just now, the implications for 5G is horrendous. All I'm going to say to summarise just now is all these latter things that were coming up just now, all the issues, right? 5G, you've got the yellow vest, Catalan, I can't remember the last one. But it says you've got these issues here. They can be resolved through common law. If you take the authority away from the government, right, you can deal with these issues, right? In Catalan, they want independence, right? That's fine. They're being prosecuted by statutory laws, and the Spanish government locked up the main culprits that were standing for this independence, the politicians, and threw them in jail. But they only done that by using statutory rules. Brexit, you're in a mess just now with Brexit because of the statutory rules. If you stand under common law, they cannot enforce statutory legislation. Convene common law courts, sign up, you can get what you want. Return the authority to the people, which is what the common law court's all about. Okay? Right, thank you for your time.
Dr. Barry, London News, Melbourne, Saturday the 19th of December, a few days before Christmas. I hope you enjoyed looking at John Smith and that information he gave you. It's very, very important, especially now with this vaccination BS coming up. They're going to force it down people's necks. Well, you got to be a man or you got to be a woman and stand up and say, no, enough is enough. We have enough idiots walking around wearing masks unnecessarily, where it's not even required here in Victoria and in most parts of Australia. But we have people who are total cowards, who are submissive to everything because of brainwashing, and these corrupt politicians, criminal politicians have said, you've got to do this, and they can do what they like with this. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. The information and identification is pretty important. Get yourself one if you can. It's well worth it. Now, as far as the International Common Law Court, the UK, do not send anything to John Smith at the moment, because they're in lockdown, and they've been in lockdown on and off, and then mostly on in the UK and up in Scotland as well. Even the volunteers are not allowed to come into the building. It's pathetic. He's thousands and thousands of emails behind, and it's collapsed, and it has never regained consciousness, if you like, since all this BS started. So be patient. It will happen. He has got people working on it. Yes, like I am sick of it too. It's getting hold of John is hard, although he has rung me a couple of weeks ago. Again, he rung me for a change, and he's very, very well tied up in some case, international case, and he has charged Boris Johnson and a couple of other people with crimes against the people. So look, just hang in there. Now, another thing I'd like to point out, the Common Law Court, we have in Victoria, we have not had a case yet because of the lockdowns and of course Christmas. We will have Common Law Court cases coming up definitely in the end of January and definitely in February. We have a different plan set up. Now, up in interstate, we have a couple of clowns who went ahead with two common law courts in the Sydney, New South Wales area. They had the same jury for 4 cases. They were told not to do it again. And of course, just recently, they had another case with, I think it was 3 cases with the same jury. The court was not on a level playing field. They had the adjudicator up on a stage, which is just nothing more than another case of fiction. They have been expelled, according to John Smith, has expelled them from the International Common Law Court, so they've got nothing to do with it. At the moment, there is no common law court in Australia. because we haven't had not a case in Victoria, and until that happens, we're just a talk fest. But that is going to happen. The paperwork's done and approved. It's going ahead against a couple of small criminals and then some big criminals, right? But be wary of making donations to any common law courts or any organization, because there's another crowd who are convinced they're part of it, they're a common law court. Look, that's great. If people want to set up a common law court, great, but do it properly. Every case has to be 100% with no flaws. But setting up assemblies and setting up common law courts that are attached to the fictional system and relating to acts and stuff, it's fiction. Just stay away from it and don't get involved. Just hang in there. We've had a very bad year. And the reason we had a very bad year is because the sheep, now let's not call these people sheep anymore because they're sick. They have consented, and they consent to everything. So until they take their vaccination, there'll be more room, and then perhaps the sensible people that are awake now will stand up and do something. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and let's keep battling on. And I hope you enjoyed that video from John. It was made quite recently, and he gave me permission to use it, and was quite happy to do so. Anyway, London News signing off. Thanks for that. And there's information at the back here, guys, email addresses and stuff. Okay, bye.